We share our planet with 6 billion other people just like us. The human instinct for survival is nature's biggest success story. Yet the way some people have stared death in the face and survived can seem to defy scientific explanation. Liverpool, England. Ex-police officer Leslie Harrison Pitt was stabbed with a 7-inch screwdriver. It should have killed her.
Even though it's been 12 years, it's still so fresh in my memory. I can remember every detail and everything about that evening, like it was yesterday.
But what she doesn't know is why she survived. Leslie was on a routine patrol with colleague Ruth Polhill when a call came in. Burglar on premises. Little did Leslie know that this would be her last patrol. For the first time, we take Leslie back to the scene of the crime where she confronted the armed burglar and to meet her colleague Dave Seville to find out exactly what happened that night.
He was actually up on the wall when Ruth came into contact with him. And Ruth noticed at that point that he had a knife and a screwdriver, which he'd threatened her with.
Get back, get up!
No, he's here! He's here! He's here!
And this is where I came into contact with him initially, as he came round the corner.
Back, get up!
He's here!
The first blow hit me, which was to my abdomen. And at first I just thought it was a punch. And it winded me.
In fact, Leslie had been stabbed.
By that time, 2 colleagues had arrived. He managed to throw us all off. I managed to grab him again. We ended up here, fighting against this wall. And at that point, I got another blow to the arm. And unbeknownst to me, that was when I'd already had the stab wound to the abdomen, and I had a further stab wound to my arm. You don't actually feel anything. I think you're surviving on adrenaline.
For several critical minutes, Leslie had managed to maintain pursuit, but she realized something was wrong. As she collapsed to the ground, colleague Dave Seville made a shocking discovery.
Well, this is where I came in. Stopped here, I literally froze because I could just see you slumped at the bottom of the entry there. I ran down and Ruth was with you.
That's right.
And she'd run some considerable distance, really, when you consider the injuries that she'd sustained. It was amazing, really, that she had got this far. And I could see just below your rib cage, there was a mark and there was blood pouring out of it. And the instinct reaction was just to put my hand over the top of it, just to stop it, just to stem the flow of blood.
And I saw that my shirt was just red.
Yeah.
I knew then I was in trouble. I remember you giving me first aid. I lost consciousness then. And that was when my chase ended. Yeah.
Leslie didn't know it, but she was now fighting for her life. What happened in the next 10 minutes would decide whether she lived or died. To find out more, we need the help of this man, Curtis Lentz, a believer who nearly met his maker. Like Leslie, he was stabbed in the abdomen, but not by a 7-inch screwdriver. Curtis Lentz was impaled on a 16-foot tree.
People have been amazed at how anything like that could go through a person's body and still live. And I said, only by the grace of God am I here.
Just like Leslie, disaster struck Curtis when he was at work. In his case, uprooting and stacking trees.
I had taken them all down with the exception of 2 trees I had left. And I had swung back around to get the next to last one, and when I raised my bucket up and started to swing back around to get the last tree, somehow this tree just shot out of the pile of trees.
In a freak accident, one of the trees was catapulted into the air. and headed straight for Curtis.
And then all of a sudden, I heard a glass break, and I looked, and the tree was in on me. It was that quick, just like someone had shot it out of a bow and arrow.
And this 3-meter-long arrow was now stuck in Curtis's gut.
It was a terrible pain. I mean, to say it was a bad pain would be an understatement. It was excruciating. It's nothing like I've ever felt in my life.
But worse was to come. The log jammed the controls of the bulldozer.
It immediately started moving forward at a real slow pace. It had my legs pinned, so I couldn't pick my feet up to reach the pedals to make it back up either. So, I mean, you know, I was just trapped.
The forward motion of the vehicle forced the log through his body, skewering him to the seat.
All the time it was moving forward, the tree was working this way into my body. I kind of prayed. I said, Lord, if you don't give me some help, I'm not going to be here.
Curtis's faith was being tested to the full. How would his prayers be answered? Bulldozer operator Curtis Lentz was stacking trees when he was hit below the belt by a flying log. The log jammed the bulldozer's controls and it started inching forward, slowly pushing the log further into his body.
All the time it was moving forward, the tree was working this way into my body. I kind of prayed. I said, Lord, if you don't give me some help, I'm not going to be here.
Seconds later, Curtis's prayers were answered when 2 of his colleagues appeared from nowhere. One of them grabbed a chainsaw.
He immediately cut the tree on the outside of the machine, and when he did, it let the pressure off of the machine because it wasn't walking forward, it stopped. The part that was in me just backed out and just fell in the floorboard. The Lord had severed a nerve to cut the pain off because I quit hurting immediately.
The wound from the tree should have been enough to kill Curtis, but amazingly, he was still alive. So just how much damage should a flying tree do?
The key question in determining how much wounding that projectile creates when it strikes a human body is directly proportional to how much of that energy is transmitted to the human body and to which organ systems it's transmitted.
Scientists don't have a lot of data on the energy produced by flying logs. What they do understand is bullet ballistics. Using the latest high-speed camera technology, the effects of a bullet's energy when fired through water can be seen. First, the bullet from a .45 handgun traveling at the speed of sound. On the high-speed camera, the energy pressure wave, or cavitation, as the bullet passes through the water is clear. But what's even more impressive is what it leaves behind. Enough energy to burst the bottom of the tank. A rifle fires a bullet of similar size and mass, but traveling at twice the speed of sound. This time, the high-speed camera captures images of far greater cavitation, and enough energy is transferred to the water tank to completely destroy it.
We're looking at 2 bullets that actually are very similar in weight, the one being very high, very long, very high velocity, tremendous amount of energy. We have another one approximately the same weight, but at a much slower rate, rounded nose, much less damage.
For bullets of equal weight, more energy comes from higher speed. The low-velocity bullet transfers enough energy to damage the melon. The high-velocity bullet, with much more energy, blows the melon apart. So what does this reveal about Curtis and the flying log? Damage is caused by energy, and the energy of a flying object is the result of weight and speed, or mass and velocity. What kind of energy did the tree possess when it hit Curtis? ballistic scientists rebuild the cab of Curtis's bulldozer. They aim to compare the penetrating power of a 9mm bullet with that of a flying log, both targeted at a stack of wet newspaper. The paper is a good substitute for the density of the human body. First, the 9mm bullet.
Stand by, firing now.
The bullet penetrates the paper 10 centimeters deep. Next, a fence post stands in for the tree that impaled Curtis. The wooden stake is fired fast enough to pierce the laminated glass.
As you can see, it's hit the paper a little bit off-centre, but it's quite good. And got a good amount of penetration there. We'll take it out and have a good look at it.
How deep has the fence post penetrated?
About the same as the bullet, but for different reasons. We've got a light bullet travelling quickly, and the fence post, heavier mass, but a lot slower.
So the initial impact of the tree had the same energy as a low-velocity bullet. And all that energy hit Curtis in the gut.
Curtis's injury occurred in this area, where the tree entered his abdomen, so it entered in this kind of trajectory.
The tree that impaled Curtis was much bigger than a bullet. It was 10 centimeters across.
He was left with a large wound of the skin and the soft tissue, measuring approximately 6 by 10 centimeters, I think.
The initial strike might not have killed Curtis, but the danger didn't stop there. As the bulldozer edged forward, the tree bored right through his body.
In that area, there's a small intestine, large intestine, or colon. There are major blood vessels, such as the femoral artery. There are urogenital organs, such as the spermatic cord. And then there's the bladder.
He should have suffered catastrophic internal injuries.
In Curtis's case, he had the initial exploration which showed that he didn't have any major internal injuries.
Incredibly, the tree had skewered Curtis right through without hitting a single major organ or structure. Doctors were baffled. But there's one man who isn't. Professional sword swallower Dan Mayer knows one way to survive impaling.
As sword swallowers, we impale ourselves every time we swallow a sword. We risk death every time we swallow a sword. If something were to go wrong, if the sword would puncture the esophagus or puncture the lining of the stomach, we could very easily die within a matter of minutes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 24-inch long stainless steel blade. I'm going to plunge it over my tongue, down my esophagus, not just side of my heart, but between my lungs, down into the lower esophageal sphincter, and hopefully down into my stomach, about this far down. That's it.
Exactly what happens to Dan's organs is revealed by real-time X-ray technology known as fluoroscopy. There's no trick, just a steady hand required.
You have to nudge aside the cardiac muscle of your heart, slide it between your lungs, down through the esophageal sphincter, and on into the stomach. It's an odd feeling, it's a strange feeling. You have to repress the stomach, the retch reflexes in the stomach, and then slowly pull it back out again without cutting yourself or puncturing the bottom of your stomach.
By inserting the blade slowly, organs can be safely pushed aside. This is why Curtis survived. In Memphis, at the Elvis Presley Trauma Department where Curtis was flown, it took 9 operations to get the hole cleaned up. Curtis was back home in a fortnight.
The tree branch actually moved slowly enough that it apparently pushed the organs out of the way and spared the major structures from injury.
But it easily could have been so different.
The doctor said if the tree had been an inch lower, there wouldn't have been anything left. I wouldn't have survived. It was a true miracle, no doubt about it.
Rushed to Liverpool's Royal University Hospital, Leslie had also suffered a penetrating injury to the abdomen. But unlike Curtis, her wound was small and the internal damage hidden from doctors.
Hi,
Jeffy.
Nice to see you.
meet you.
Come in, this is the resuscitation room.
For the first time, Leslie returns to where her life hung in the balance 12 years ago.
You were brought into here and various things were done to you. Intravenous lines were put in. You were given lots of intravenous fluids. You were attached to a cardiac monitor. The reason that you were unconscious was because you'd lost blood and you were shocked. We gave you first clear fluids and then we gave you a blood transfusion.
Right.
And in response to that, you regained consciousness while you were in this department.
So she has responded to
But then things started to go wrong.
Just some fresh air to help you breathe. My name's Michael, one of the nurses going to be looking after you.
You deteriorated very rapidly, and so we only had a few minutes at that point.
Doctors realised the screwdriver could have gone upwards towards the vital organs. Surgeons had only minutes to act. Their quick thinking and cool heads would save Leslie. Denver, Colorado. The secret of this man's survival sheds light on how surgeons work under extreme pressure. His life was saved by doctors risking theirs. Nicholas Villarreal used to make car airbags. As a machine operator, he handled the sensitive and dangerous materials required to create airbag triggers. These volatile initiators are the vital component that inflates a car airbag in milliseconds.
At that time, we just make initiators for safety products, airbags, and this initiator hold powder. This powder is very sensitive to the heat, to the electrostatic, to the friction.
Bomb investigator Rick Young carefully handles an initiator. It can be deadlier than a bullet.
That's a comparison to a 45 caliber. You know, these can be dropped and fairly shock sensitive, where they're a dangerous piece of equipment. It's like any explosive compound. They're shock sensitive, they're heat sensitive, they're subject to friction, static. In this case, this initiator, or the compound inside these initiators, have to be that sensitive in order for them to function rapidly enough to perform the job that they do as a very valuable life-saving tool in today's vehicles.
The machine Nicholas operated handled up to 500 initiators at a time. Whenever the machine jammed, Nicholas, wearing his face shield, goggles and grounding strap, would lean over the machine to free the blockage. Suddenly, his world went up in smoke. Like bullets in a fire, 500 initiators became missiles.
To Nick, he probably saw one flash of light, heard one boom, then he had the positive and the negative pressure phases of the explosion that occurred, where it actually dislodged the protective clothing that he was wearing, the eye protection and the hood.
I just get hit in part of my face, part of my arm, and my chest, and I can feel my blood dripping on the floor.
Nicholas had been hit by 18 airbag triggers traveling as fast as low-velocity bullets. How had he survived? The triggers weighed only a fraction of the weight of a bullet. They were traveling at high speed, but didn't have enough energy to penetrate far into his body. Arriving at the scene, bomb investigator Rick Young was amazed that no one had been killed. Then he realized Nicholas was still in great danger.
You were a very hurt individual with these things that detonated at a high velocity, that had embedded into you, and we weren't certain if these things were inert, if they had detonated outside, or if they had launched in you and were live explosives. I think the comment that stuck most in my mind were when you told me, get it out, it might be live and will blow my face off.
How you doing?
Surgeon Michael Gordon looked at the X-rays, which presented no real surgical problem. But then he learnt the truth. The initiator embedded in Nicholas's nose could be live. He was a time bomb waiting to go off. And that wasn't all.
The concern with the particular device was that if it became in contact with air, that would activate the device and cause it to explode.
The trauma team now had to think fast on their feet. Any wrong move could be disastrous.
The bomb people who came to the emergency room to evaluate it indicated to us that it had the explosive power of about 1/8 of a stick of a dynamite.
In the lab, scientists mock up an airbag trigger using a cardboard tube to examine its explosive potential. The cardboard tube containing the compound used at the time of Nicholas's accident is placed in a steel drum. The drum is placed in a cardboard box, and then the mixture is triggered.
It certainly would have been a devastating injury had it gone off.
The compound inside the initiator is called zirconium potassium chloride. It needs to be handled with care. One spark and the sensitive dry powder explodes.
Normally it's transported with a small amount of water present, usually between 5 and 10% of its mass of water added, to prevent the static getting to the zirconium metal surface.
The spark test is run again, but this time water is added to the sensitive compound. The static spark fails to affect the compound. Even when a naked flame is placed near the wet powder, it still doesn't ignite. Bomb investigator Rick Young knew exactly what they had to do: operate underwater. To save Nicholas and protect themselves, the surgeons came up with a plan straight out of the A-Team. Nicholas Villarreal had an explosive device embedded in his nose, liable to blow up on contact with air. His trauma team came up with a plan. A sticky back plastic sheet was placed around Nicholas's head, and then water was poured over his face until it was 5 inches deep. Surgeons now had a small pool right over Nicholas's face in which to safely remove the initiator.
We wore leaded gowns to try to protect us in case there was any explosion that did occur, but there was no way to protect our faces or our hands because those areas had to be free to be able to operate on the patient. What we were then able to do was to make an incision down onto your nose and remove the trigger through your nose and keep it underwater so that it never would have a chance of exploding.
The operation was a complete success. Under extremely difficult circumstances, quick-thinking surgeons kept their heads. And so too did Nicholas Villarreal. Losing blood from a vicious attack with a 7-inch screwdriver, policewoman Leslie Harrison Pitt was fading fast in the resuscitation room. Like Nicholas, her life was now in the hands of quick-thinking trauma doctors.
You deteriorated very rapidly, and so we only had a few minutes at that point.
What Leslie originally had thought to be a punch had in fact been a piercing strike to her heart. Doctors used a specific procedure invented just a decade earlier, and it was this that saved her.
And what actually happened to you was a single blow through the abdominal wall, through the diaphragm, and into the heart.
How they made that diagnosis was down to this man, another survivor 6,000 miles away in California.
I have a colleague here in the office, and he came up to me one day. He says, "My God, Steiner," he says, "you save more lives before breakfast than most people do in their lifetime."
In February 1976, Dr. Steiner, surgeon and pilot, was flying his wife and 4 children home to Lincoln, Nebraska, when catastrophe struck.
At that point, there was a low-hanging level of clouds, and I was about halfway through my instrument training at that time and didn't want to go above them and go through them, which I probably could have done very easily. But I went below. I didn't realize that I was as close to the ground as I was. My wife turned around but didn't have a chance to put her seatbelt on. We hit a row of trees doing 164 miles an hour, and we became a missile. The whole process took about 2.5 seconds, so this monstrous crash wherein my life passed before my eyes, literally. I laid there against the dashboard of the airplane, waiting to die. I knew it was going to happen, and then all of a sudden it got quiet, and you could hear a pin drop, and nothing happened, and I knew I was still alive.
Dr. Steiner's wife died instantly, but his children, though badly injured, were still alive. It was over 9 hours before the family were brought to the nearest hospital.
They didn't know what to do. They had a mass casualty situation in a small hospital, and there had been no training in that regard. I did better in the field taking care of my kids with limited resources than was done in the hospital.
This horrific experience drove Steiner to rewrite the rule book.
The idea was to take knowledge that we had, put it together in a logical way so that it could be done where lives would be saved.
The result was the Advanced Trauma Life Support System, or ATLS, a methodical guide that put trauma care into a priority of life-saving actions.
Before ATLS, the assessment of a seriously injured patient was, certainly in my experience, was very haphazard, and often what was most obvious on the patient might get dealt with rather than what was most life-threatening. And a good example might be somebody with a seriously mangled leg who also had a severe chest injury and wasn't able to breathe properly. And because the leg was most obvious, people might concentrate on that rather than pick up on the breathing.
We're looking to identify and treat life-threatening injuries in the priority order that they pose a threat to life. So if you're not breathing, you're going to die in a short number of minutes, and we need to fix that now before we deal with hemorrhage, which will kill you in 20, 30 minutes. So we need to deal with the airway and breathing problems first.
Some breath sounds.
Every emergency physician and every surgeon today now takes the ATLS course. Doctors in 46 countries use this system, including the surgeons who saved stabbed policewoman Leslie Harrison Pitt. So how did ATLS help Leslie survive?
Leslie, hello. My name's Andrew, one of the doctors. You're in hospital. You've been stabbed.
The first thing that we would have looked at would have been her airway.
Eyes still looks clear.
Okay, Leslie.
Opening her own airway, but not opening her eyes.
In fact, her airway was patent. She was breathing for herself. Her breathing, B, was not too bad.
Little bit of oxygen for you, Leslie.
As far as C, her circulation was concerned, she had definite evidence of significant blood loss. She was shocked, and so fairly large volumes of fluid were infused.
Is that good entry on both sides?
Leslie responded well at first.
Deep breaths for me.
She then deteriorated very rapidly.
Let's cross-match.
That was an indication to us that something serious was going on. Either further blood loss or the possibility that this in fact was an injury to her heart. And both of these required urgent surgical intervention.
She's going to need to go to theatre. Ready to go?
The ATLS approach to Leslie's injury with its logical ABCs guide pointed doctors to the problem, her circulation. Rushed to surgery, they discovered why Leslie had deteriorated so quickly in the resuscitation room.
With somebody stabbed in the heart, what happens is the heart is surrounded by a tense, thick membrane, the pericardium, and only a very small amount of blood might leak out from the heart and be trapped by the pericardium. But that small amount of blood outside the pericardium will put pressure on the heart so the heart can't fill. And if it can't fill, it then can't pump.
the pressure around your heart rapidly built up. And in fact, it didn't matter how much fluid we put into you, your heart couldn't function until that pressure had been relieved. And that's why you needed to have your chest opened and the wound to your heart repaired.
After her life-saving heart operation, Leslie lay sedated in intensive care. The next 5 days would prove critical. All heart surgery carries a high degree of risk, but Leslie had a secret weapon, her fitness, and it was already engaged in the battle for her survival.
I would probably run 3 miles, maybe 3 times a week. But I would also do other things in between, so I'd do maybe step classes or, you know, the squash or anything really. So at that particular time, I was probably at my physical peak, at my fittest level.
The fact that you were fit undoubtedly helped you a lot.
Why would that be so important?
Because people who are less fit are that much closer to death to start with.
Why did fitness make such a difference to Leslie's survival? Dr. Hugh Montgomery has been investigating why some patients survive major surgery and others don't.
For major sorts of surgery, fitness makes a massive difference to their chance of survival, because in the process of getting fit, your heart becomes stronger and more efficient at pumping blood, your lungs become more efficient at taking up oxygen, your circulation at delivering that oxygen, and actually your cells become much more efficient at using them.
But how do you know if your fitness is enough to make a difference? Cross-country athlete John is a regular runner, just like Leslie before the stabbing. Sports scientists can measure fitness by determining a point known as anaerobic threshold.
This is the point where your body cells don't get enough oxygen and have to work without oxygen. And that's the sort of achy feeling you get in your muscles if you run for a bus a bit too quickly when you're not very fit.
Running at a comfortable pace, John's muscles produce energy by burning oxygen. This is known as aerobic exercise. When the body is pushed further, demand for oxygen is dramatically increased. This is called anaerobic exercise.
Anaerobic energy production occurs when either when the supply of oxygen is limited or when energy must be produced at a much faster rate than the aerobic system can do.
The crossover point between aerobic and anaerobic energy production is known as the anaerobic threshold and can be identified by increased lactic acid levels in the blood. Compared with an unfit person, a runner like John or Leslie will exercise for a longer period before lactic acid levels begin to dramatically increase.
If your anaerobic threshold is very high, in other words, you're very fit, and it takes a lot of work before your blood becomes acid with exercise, your chance of surviving a major operation is about 100%.
His oxygen uptake values are they seem to be hovering around the mid-60s now, so around 65, maybe even a bit higher than that. So those are values that you would expect of a very well-trained endurance athlete, not necessarily a truly elite athlete, but a very well-trained athlete.
You okay? Yeah. I reached the bottom of my lungs there.
When one becomes fit, one's adapting one's body for very intense, stressful demands. So those are demands of increasing oxygen delivery to cells, increasing fuel supply to cells, to allow those cells to cope with the extra work they're doing. And a situation of major trauma is just the same. It's just that you're not voluntarily putting yourself into that situation of work. So you're becoming injured. You're going to have to deliver massive amounts of oxygen, increase blood, and increase nutritional substrates to those cells. And if you can't make those deliveries under those intense demand situations, then you're going to die.
Fitness was Leslie's secret weapon. Together with ATLS, quick-thinking medical staff and skillful surgeons, she survived a blade through the heart that would have killed most others. Are there lessons to be learned from this man? As a frontline police officer, Lieutenant Courtney Griffin has always been in the thick of the action. As a former commander of a SWAT team in Chesterfield County, Virginia, he has a lifetime's experience on the beat. Like Leslie, every day Courtney had to be ready for the unexpected, but there's one he'll never forget. May the 22nd, 1987. Police are called to a house in Petersburg, Virginia, where a desperate gunman has taken refuge. This shocking police footage is not a training exercise, it's the real thing. As the drama unfolded, Courtney Griffin's SWAT team was called in to make an assault on the house. An earlier raid by 2 officers went disastrously wrong when they came face to face with the gunman in the attic of this house.
The young patrolman, Officer Seidel, stepped further up into the attic with a shotgun to fire at the suspect and was shot through the face. The bullet entered his cheek, came out the back of his neck. And the man shot again, and the bullet went through Seidel's upper chest. He was able to exit, both of the men were able to exit the house under their own power, and Seidel collapsed in the street. And one of our detectives and one Petersburg officer dragged him into a police car and rushed him about 2 blocks to the Petersburg hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery.
The SWAT team were given the go to make the assault. Courtney Griffin led his team into the danger zone.
All I recall was there was a flash, a bang, and an impact.
Courtney, good to see you.
Good to see you,
18
buddy.
years. How are you? You look well.
Greg Seidel and Courtney Griffin returned to the scene of the firefight they both survived 18 years earlier.
I've driven by it many times.
I don't know if you recall the first time we met, but you'd been in the hospital a couple of days, and I recall that you had tubes running in everywhere, and you looked like you were in a lot of discomfort, and I think I introduced myself by saying I'm Courtney Griffin and I killed the guy that shot you.
You did, and you went through some...
Courtney has never been back here until today. The last time, he nearly didn't make it out alive.
And the bullet came down and struck me right here. Somebody said, "Is anybody hit?" And I said, "I'm okay."
It was here that Courtney was struck by a bullet and came to within an inch, quite literally, of his life. In May 1987, Courtney Griffin was leading a SWAT team assault on a lone gunman holed up in the attic of this house. Over 150 rounds were fired. Gunman Stuart Coley responsible for half of them. The 2 policemen retraced their steps through their house of horror.
Stuart Coley stuck the pistol around the corner, but I never saw it. I don't know whether I blinked or whether I had just taken my attention away from the upper stairs, and he fired, and that's when I got hit in the side here. And I think I went back against this window, and the window stopped me, or the window ledge. This bullet that Coley fired at me from approximately 6 feet away was a 9mm full-jacketed bullet, and it struck me as I was turned sideways. It struck me from the side right along about spleen level.
Momentarily slammed backwards by the bullet, Courtney pressed on into the dark, knowing he was about to face a desperate gunman.
Coming in from outside.
Bullet holes remain to this day, a testament to the ferocity of the gun battle.
He was on his hands and knees in this position. He was firing directly at us.
As the gunman's shots whistled by, Courtney took aim.
I fired point blank at him, and 2 of my rounds struck him in the face and terminated him.
The Carling Street gun battle was finally over. Courtney, though shot, was only badly bruised.
The 9mm bullet struck me right on the edge of my vest, about a ½ inch from the edge of the vest, and a very solid impact, I'll put it that way.
Courtney was saved by what he was wearing, his bullet-resistant vest. Soon after the assault, Courtney was inducted into the Kevlar Survivors Club. Today it ranks nearly 3,000 members saved by the Wonder Fibre. At the DuPont chemical factory where the bullet-resistant fibres are made, Chief Scientist Dr. Vlodek Gabara explains how the Kevlar vest saved Courtney's life.
Amazingly to me, the bullet lodged in the vest approximately a ½ inch from the edge of the Kevlar, and Kevlar stopped it, saved me.
Typical vest contains many layers of material. Both the number of layers and the weave structure are very important. When the bullet hits the vest, the largest amount of material participates in stopping the bullet. The energy is dissipated in a large amount of material. As you see, when I depress this panel, there's a substantial amount of material which knows about my action.
Because of the multiple layers, a large surface area of Kevlar fibre material is able to absorb the energy of the bullet and stop it in its tracks. A small entry wound and larger exit wound in the melon demonstrate the damage a human body might receive from the transfer of energy. So energy-absorbing superfibres can catch a speeding bullet and save lives like Courtney's. Could the same vest have stopped the screwdriver attack on Leslie? No. A vest that's designed to stop bullets wouldn't stop a sharp object like an ice pick or even a screwdriver.
To stop the ice pick, we have to use still Kevlar, but in a very different fabric construction. I will show you that this material, with the same ice pick, the ice pick bends, and I'm not the strongest person. And you see there is no penetration. And the vest structure is very similar in principle to the ballistic vest, multi-layer, but has much finer weave.
Leslie wasn't wearing a protective vest at all.
At the time, there wasn't any protective gear for us to wear. There wasn't any protective jackets or anything like that. We had women police officers had little or no protection.
At the time of Leslie's attack in 1992, body armour was not part of the police uniform in the UK. It was introduced soon afterwards, but was cumbersome and heavy.
Of the vest. This vest, which is about 17, 18-year-old, weighs about 8 pounds. If we now put today's vest, it weighs about 4 pounds, a little bit more than 4 pounds, which is about half of it. Now, they are designed for the same threat level. It's a fundamental change over 15, 20 years in a weight reduction by a factor of 2.
With a stab-proof vest, Leslie would have avoided a major injury and would probably still be in the police today. But survivors don't have regrets. On his last day as a police officer, Courtney wore a tuxedo to work. Even so, he still wore his protective vest.
Thanks to the Kevlar vest I was wearing, I'm still here to tell the story nearly 18 years later.
Nicholas Villarreal no longer handles explosive and sensitive materials. That's if you don't count the kids.
I just see myself through the mirror and say, hey, this was lucky. And I'm happy to happen to me versus happen to somebody else. Because maybe whoever was, maybe it's not the lucky I am.
Curtis Lentz is singing again with the Frog Jump Quartet, and wherever Curtis goes, his wife Gail and the tree go too.
I see people and say, you're the miracle man, you know. And I say, well, yes, if that's what you want to call me, that's fine.
Although Leslie was never fit enough to rejoin the police, she now has her hands full at home.
I'm so glad that I've done that now, and I'm quite happy being a full-time mum. My life is a happy one, but it could have been so different.